Hello, thank you for taking time to listen to Di and Sue's story. I'm Julie from Veterans NHS Wales. I first met Di when he came for treatment with myself at Veterans NHS Wales, and it's been a pleasure to get to know him and his wife Sue. Di was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder associated with his military service in Northern Ireland. Post-traumatic stress disorder doesn't just have an impact on the person who is suffering from it. It affects that person's family as well. And so with that in mind, it seemed most appropriate to talk to Di and to Sue about their experiences of working with myself in Veterans NHS Wales. So Di, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm 58 years of age, so I used to serve with the 1st Battalion of the Royal Regiment of Wales. Sort of met Sue whilst doing wheelchair basketball. It wasn't wheelchair basketball, it was actually sort of track and field events. And we got together, and here we are today.
I'm very glad that you're both joining me today to share your story. Di, if I start with you, just tell me a bit of what life was like before you came to Veterans NHS Wales.
I was Mr. Angry. I thought I was just I had anger management issues. It's me and the daughter couldn't be in the same room. It's like matching petrol. And I would get upset with over anything and everything that was said. And I was always uptight. And basically a horrible person.
And so what do you remember of that time before Di came to therapy?
He had a short fuse, and little things would get him aggravated that normally you just shrug it off, but it would upset him. And that was a lot of it. And like you said, in the family, it got to the point where I felt a bit like a referee, because I was sort of piggy in the middle, and he would expect me to take his side on things, and I had to sort of say, look, this is not happening, this is how it is. But we'd always try and wait until the kids had gone to bed before we talked about stuff. And that was it, really. He knew he needed some help, but he didn't know what.
What was it that prompted you to get help in the end?
Well, there was one of the guys from wheelchair basketball, Dan Frisbee. He said, why do you come to a veterans group? I knew there was a veterans group there. I just never did think it appealed to me. So I went down there, and on a third visit there, Neil from Change Step picked up on something along with Simon, and they said, we think we need a woman you'd like to go and see. She'd help you out with your problem. And I couldn't say what problem. They said, just come and have a chat. And that's how it all started.
And Di, what do you remember about the first appointments that you had with Veterans NHS Wales?
The first time I had it, I was really if I can say it, crapping myself. I got told very broad Northern Ireland accent, and that I thought to myself, that's not going to work. But to be honest, I thought it worked far better than I expected it to. And I was able to cope with things a lot easier.
And Di, I know that you were troubled by your military service in Northern Ireland. What was it like really working with a therapist that herself comes from Northern Ireland?
At first, I thought it was very scary. But thinking of it logically, it's probably the best thing to have happened, because it got my head around it a lot easier and a lot quicker. And I found I was able to help, with the help of Sue, go back, talk about things. And I found it, me personally, I found it quite easy. Easy to talk about things.
And Sue, what do you remember about the earlier sessions of Di having therapy with me?
It was sort of mixed emotions, really, because he would come back and he would started to tell me a little bit more about things that had happened. And he said that you'd encouraged him to talk about, things that were upsetting him and troubling him. And these were all things that he'd locked away for a long time. And sometimes he'd get upset and he'd cry. And I'd fill up and we'd just have a cry and talk and get it out that way, It wasn't easy. And I know it was hard for him, but it was something that he felt he had to do.
And Di, what do you think was the best thing about having therapy?
It gave a huge weight off my shoulders. Something I'd buried for 30 odd years. And we're talking to it about it made it a lot easier. The era at the time and the era I was in, it sort of, if you spoke out about sort of, oh, you were worried about this and worried about that, you were called weak and you were called a coward and you were ostracized. So, and the culture I was in was basically sort of, you didn't talk about it, you grabbed a bottle and you just knocked it down. You can't do that these days.
And Di, what part do you think alcohol played in your particular problems?
It played a huge part. I just turned to it because I found sort of it's so easy. And being based in Germany, it was so cheap as well. Literally for a fiver, you were out for the count. So it was easy to turn to that, and because you didn't want to be seen as weak, nobody ever talked about it.
And when you think about the culture of the military, do you think that played a part on in your ability to get help? Did it help you get help, or did it hinder you?
I'd like to say it hindered me because you didn't want to be seen as weak by asking for help or asking for advice or talking about anything that went wrong. So you just kept it with yourself, and you just, well, for a better phrase, just soldiered on. And that's how it was.
And so, what are your thoughts on? Obviously, Di was diagnosed as having post-traumatic stress disorder. What were your thoughts on learning that that's what the problem was?
I wasn't completely surprised, but I just felt like we had to support him as best we could. And for me, going to see yourself, it was as if someone had given him permission, he kept it locked away all that time, that he needed someone to say, it's okay, you can talk about it. And I think that was a big step for him. And we found out some of the triggers then that had affected him referenced our daughter, and he was able to deal with that then. And since then, the relationship has been fantastic.
And what do you think were the most challenging parts of therapy?
Talking about it and taking that first step, because it's so long of a culture where you bottle it up. And I must admit, you had me crying quite a few times, which, looking back at it, was probably the best thing that's happened. And being able to talk about taking that first step and then talking about it, that was a huge, huge step for me.
And Di, what do you think you have learned the most from coming to therapy?
The thing I've learned the most is you're not alone. It's surprising how much help is out there. It's because I always understand it's just one person. We were always told to go, if you go and see a therapist or a trick cyclist, it's you were seen as weak. But no, I'm surprised at how much help is out there, and there's no sort of what's the word I'm looking for, stigma to it, which is what we were always told, and you always had that fear. If you ever got caught going to speaking to someone, that's it. Nobody would talk to you. You'd be ostracised, and life became very hard for you then.
So, what do you think is the biggest change that you've noticed in Di since he's had therapy?
Family life has got a lot easier. We're not so much treading on eggshells around him. It doesn't matter if there's a programme on TV about Northern Ireland, he would immediately change channels, whereas now we can sit and watch it together and discuss it. and have conversations about it, which he would never have done before. And just little things that may not seem a lot to other people, but we've noticed, and we do more things as a family, and not so much, like if he went into a room, he would always sit facing the door so he could see who was coming in and out. And he would always go, right, I'll go in first, you come in behind me. And little things that don't mean anything to anybody else. And he could tell you exactly what was in a room after he'd left for hours. And it was just little things. And it made a big difference to us.
And so if there is a family member that perhaps has a loved one that might be experiencing mental health problems because of their military service, do you have a message for them? Is there anything you want to share with them?
I'd just like to say, don't be afraid to ask for help. Everyone tries to be independent and thinks they can do it on their own. You don't have to. There's help out there, and just reach out for it. And that's the only thing I could say, really, because if we hadn't, I don't know where we'd be now.
And now, if you think about a veteran who's perhaps wondering about whether or not they should come to Veterans NHS Wales, do you have a message for them?
Take it with both hands, grab it and hold on tight. It's the best thing you'll ever do, and it'll prove to you that you are not alone.
And you've mentioned about some other help that was available to you. Do you want to share anything about your experiences with other services that worked alongside Veterans NHS Wales?
Yeah, Neil, who's down as a like mentor, he works with Change Step. If it wasn't for them, none of this would have been brought forward. So go to your veteran groups, and you'll find all sorts of groups there to help you out. And that's the front door. As soon as you go for that door, you'd be surprised what's behind it.
And obviously, now you've completed therapy. How does life look for you now, now that you've completed therapy?
It's a lot better. I feel better in myself. I don't feel uptight. And me and the daughter can actually sit in the same room without arguing. And now we're going to be a grandparents now in February, so it's even better to look forward to. So life's looking pretty good at the moment.
So you mentioned about spending time together as a family, as a couple. Are there particular activities that you enjoy particularly doing?
Well, we discovered wheelchair basketball, a bit by accident, really. But we enjoy that as a family, and it's something that I know Di was very conscious of when we had the kids, that he couldn't go and play football in the park and couldn't go for a run or a bike ride. But this was something that we could all do together. And from the children being very small, I think Aaron was about 4 or 5 when we started to play basketball. And both our children have represented Wales, which is fantastic, because wheelchair basketball is one of the very few sports where able-bodied and disabled people can play on an even footing, because it doesn't matter whether you can walk or not, because everybody's in a wheelchair. And it's so much fun, it's so competitive. And people say, oh no, I'm not competitive at all. But you give them a basketball and a wheelchair and you see that competitiveness come out. But it's a hell of a lot of fun, and it's a game that everyone can play. Doesn't matter whether you're a couple of years old or 80 or 90 years old. It's a sport for everyone, and you can do it at whatever level you want, from just recreational socialization, just going out meeting people, or you can take it that step further, like the children did, and represent your country. So yeah.
I mean, say with the veterans now, we're hoping to sort of involve them, because everything's done for the veteran, but there's nothing done for the families. So by having a basketball session, we've not used the UK use classification rules. We've just concerned as long as we get people in chairs and they're evenly matched, we just play basketball. And then by bringing the veterans' families and serving members' families in, everybody plays as one.
And so, what about you? What are your kind of hopes for the future, and what does life look like now?
Life is totally different now. Yeah, every day brings a fresh challenge. Well, that's the only way we look at it. And, now instead of flying off the handle at the slightest thing, you can see him physically sit back and take a deep breath, as if say, okay, I've got this. And everything just seems calmer. And like you said, we're going to be grandparents soon. So we're really excited for that. Can't wait.
And Diane Sue, I know that your daughter is with us today. With all your experiences, is there a message you want to give her and to your grandbaby that's on the way?
Take each day as it comes and smile. That's the best I can say.
And Sue?
Enjoy life, make the most of it. We're only here once, and it's important to live it, not be a spectator.
And is there any final reflections that you have about your experiences, Di, you as having therapy with me, or Sue supporting Di during that time? Di, is there any final thoughts that you want to share with us?
Don't be afraid to come forward and speak. I hid it away for nearly 35 years. It's not pleasant, and you lose friends very, very quickly. Sort of, if you're feeling like that, seek help. It's there, and don't be afraid to talk. It's sort of, we're not in that culture anymore, so there's always help out there.
And Sue, any final thoughts from you?
Well, we can't thank Veterans NHS enough for what you've done for us as a family. And I'm sure you can help out other veterans out there. And it's too easy to sort of think, oh, I've got it under control, I've blocked it out. But you never completely block it out. It's always there, simmering away, and it's not good for you. And they always say, don't bottle things up, talk it out. And sometimes just being there and listening is the best form of support you can do. Because sometimes it's not all about anything physical. It's about just being there and supporting the person as best you can. And that's all we can do, really.
I'll agree with that. It's not something you can do on your own. You do need your family around you. So you need to involve your family as well. Because that's the best thing I did.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you for your help. Thank you.
Thank you again for taking time to listen to this story today. Veterans NHS Wales is here to help. If, having listened to Di and Sue's story, you think that you might need our help, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. Thank you.